Good morning, grade 9s, and welcome back to Quarantine English with Mr. Fouché. Today we are not going to be working in your textbook as per usual. What we'll be doing today is we are going to run through the common writing mistakes, or common mistakes, sorry, not writing mistakes, that you guys made in the tasks that you have already completed. So this will include task 1, 2 and 3, and not task 4, I haven't received it yet. So we're just going to run through all the common mistakes that I found while marking these tasks. We're not going to be doing them as memos, so I'm not going to give you all the correct answers for this. I would prefer to do that while you have your papers in front of you. So if you can see exactly what you wrote down, it'll be better to do a memo session with you having that. Okay, since you do not have that with you now, it's best to just go through the common mistakes. So next time I see you guys, we can do that in class. Okay, but let's get started. First of all, it is task 1, which was the formal letter you had to write to a train company to complain about a ride that you experienced. You will also be asking for a refund in this activity. So with this one, the first common mistake I would like to point out is this one over here. Now, I hope you guys know this already, but that is the sender's address, the one in the top right corner. Most of you did that quite well. But here, you have to write down the address of the company that you are writing to. So let's quickly just run through what you have to do there. First thing is the name of the person receiving this. So you're going to write to a manager probably of a company. You'll have to say Mr., Mrs., Miss, whatever you want, and the surname of this person. So it's just you indicating to who the letter should be given. Now we get to the company's name. You need to write this down as well so that at least you know to who you are addressing, to what company, what institution you are addressing the formal letter. Next, we get a PO box. Okay. So PO box, that's just where the letters will be sent to. Usually with big companies, they do have a central place where all their mail is sent to. Perhaps it's just in one city, but yeah, you can't imagine sending a specific letter to a specific, let's say, building of a chain of companies. Okay, so it's always best to add the PO box here as well. And then we get to city. That's all you have to write down here. You do not need to write down the street name, the house number, the suburb. That does not matter here. Do not write it down. All you write down is just the city where this company receives their letters, the PO box as well. Then you've got the postal code, which is always 4 numbers. And there you go, people. That is it. It's all you had to write down there for the receiver's address. Okay, so common mistake number 2 was this part over here. It is what we can refer to as a heading for your letter. Okay, so that people know what is in your, what the content of your letter is. So I would probably, a very good one here would be refund requested for trip, and then I would add a date. Okay, it's very specific. It tells me exactly what I'm going to do in my letter. So that always needs to be there in a formal letter, so that there's a type of heading. It's always best to underline it. And also, it is a good idea to leave open a space between your greeting and your heading, and also your heading and your introduction. Okay? Because that, again, makes it look emphasized, because now nothing is directly written above it or below it. So it is emphasized, it's highlighted, so to speak. But underlining it is always a great way of showing that it is emphasized as well. The last thing about the letter that I'll be talking about is the way you greeted the people at the end. So that's over here. A very common mistake is people used sincerely. This is one used more often for informal letters. So you need to find the correct way of greeting. There are quite a few. The more commonly used ones is you can say faithfully. You can also say truthfully. There are quite a few of those. That's the first thing you would write down. So you would say, yours, let's say faithfully. Then, something all of you missed out on, the signature. There's a unique signature There we go, looks brilliant. But anyway, you missed out on that. You do need to sign this in order to indicate that, yes, I approve that I wrote everything in this letter. Okay, so the signature is quite important for a business letter or a formal letter. And then your name, and something you missed out on is the surname. Okay, so remember, you probably do not know this manager by name. You are just writing to this person in order to give your complaint. So you need to add your surname as well, because there are many Johns out there, but only one John, whatever his surname is. Okay, well, not necessarily, but yes, it's much narrower then. So always remember the surname. Now, we can continue to task 2, which is probably your favorite thing to do in English, and it is reported speech. Yes, I can hear all the cheers there in the background. It's great. So, now in the reported speech part, there were quite a few things we can work on there. So, a common mistake that I found there was definitely the tenses. As you know, when you take a direct speech, so direct is something that will look like John said, and then I'll have a comma, you'll have quotation marks, a quote, and the comma, or, well, invert, the quotation mark is closed. So this is what a typical direct speech would look like. If I want to make it indirect, which was what you had to do in the first part of this task, you will have to take this tense, because remember, reporting verbs in the past. I will have to take this, and if it was in the present, my indirect answer will move to the past. And let's say that this quote was in the past as well, then it moves to past perfect. I have explained this quite extensively in my previous videos. If you can still revisit them and you don't understand how this works, please go for it. When you get to grips with it, it's quite easy to do. But let's quickly talk about, let's use an example so I can quickly explain this as well. In the first question, you've got, John asked, what do we need to study for tomorrow's test? Okay, what do we need to study? So a very common way of checking a tense is to look at your verb, need. Need is something I would use in the present tense, which is where I find myself here. So this part would be present. So I need to change it to past. So need will change to needed. Many of you missed out on this. And then we get on to the next common mistake, which is quite closely linked to this one that I just mentioned. It is your time and place words. So when I write down tomorrow here, in my indirect answer, it's going to be the next day. If I wrote down here today, it would change in my indirect answer to that day. Okay, that was also a very common mistake that I found. But let's continue on. We've got another one here, which is part 2 of this task. And let me quickly read it to you so you do not get confused by this. Put the following reported statements into direct speech. So, what you got is not that. You got, John said that he whatever, whatever, okay? And you had to change that indirect speech to this. So your answer would look something like this. It's basically the reverse of what you are used to. So now, also we'll have to use this again. If my reporting verb is in the past, but this time I'm going to move into the other direction. We're doing the opposite of what we did in the first part of our task. Okay, but let's get into it. So first of all, many of you added, for this task at least, that inside the quote. It is incorrect. You can't do this because the word that was never said by John. In the indirect way of referring to his quote, you would have to use that. So John said that he loves listening to Mr. Fouché talk on online lessons, which sounds plausible. Then I use that. But if I want to say his direct words, I would say, John said, quote, I like listening to Mr. Fouché talking about English on online lessons, end quote. Know that, okay? It was a surprising mistake, but it was quite oftenly visible in your answers. Okay, well, let's continue. The next one is the last quotation mark in your answers. Oh, this is a lazy mistake, grade 9s. I hope you do not make this, or do not do this in your tests, because you lose a lot of marks, okay? You cannot do this because it is not a mistake that you make because you didn't study. This is the type of mistake you make because you are too lazy to go through your work, okay? Which is even worse, okay? It's a horrible mistake to make. And that is when you take this little quotation mark and you erase it. You don't add it. So you were in a hurry to answer your question. You did everything correctly, but you just left out this part in your answer. Okay, you lose marks. It's not a good idea to do this. And whenever a question, let's even use literature, if they ask you to quote something out of a literary text and you leave out the quotation mark there, you get nothing. You get no marks. In language, you can still get a couple of marks here and there for different parts, but when you do it in something like that type of question, you lose everything. So try and not do this. It's a very simple solution. Just go through your work after you have finished. Okay, it's very simple. If you do that, you are very quickly going to notice, oh, I didn't add a quotation mark here, and then just add it. Okay, next thing to talk about, punctuation when doing direct speech. So let's say we'll change this part here, okay? Instead of said, John asked. Okay? Obviously that's incorrect as well. So there's my sentence, okay? Whenever I see asked, I know that John is going to say a question because that's what asked refers to. So his direct speech needs to have a question mark. It's that simple. If I said exclaimed here, I would use an exclamation mark. Okay. It was also a very common mistake. Many of you lost half a mark for that. Now, that is it for reported speech. We now continue on to your second favorite thing in English, which is actives and passives. This is task 3, of course. And let's quickly run through the common mistakes that you guys made there. To be honest, most of you did quite well here. It's not too bad. There were 2 questions that I'm going to focus on as well, where most of you didn't understand what's going on there. And I'll just quickly run over those. So the first common mistake, and I'm going to write that down. You've got the first sentence here. You have to change it from active to passive. It's the first part of this task. The large tiger was chasing the injured deer. You will notice that, as always, you've got subject, verb, object. And the subject and object take different places, and this will go into your third participle form, your verb. So whenever I have an object like the injured deer, injured, which is an adjective, will have to move with my noun. Some of you just completely just said the deer, which is incorrect. You are missing out on the adjective. Okay, that was one mistake. Another one, which was also used quite often, is your continuous tenses fell away. So for the answer, the large tiger was chasing the injured deer. I would start with my object, which is the injured deer, was being chased. Many of you just took being, ignored it, and just said was chased by. So then, yes, you are still in the same tense, but not in the continuous way. So for that reason, you lose marks there. So whenever a continuous sentence is changed to passive, always expect the word being to be included there. Let's continue on. We've got the next one, which was time words. And I'm actually going to focus on question 1.2 to explain this. So I'll quickly write it down for you. Let's see if we can do this as quickly as possible. So John painted. Okay, there we go. Painted the house last week. There we go. So John painted the house last week. If I quickly do that, we'll see painted is my verb, the house is my object, John being my subject. Okay, so last week, what is that? This is something different. It's not really part of anything there. It is indicating a time. Now, grade 9s, try and take very good note of this. whenever you have a time word in your sentence and you want to change it from active to passive, it stays at the end of your sentence. Okay? Grammatically speaking, this is the best way to communicate. So if I want to say, now I want to eat because I'm hungry. Okay, you should say, I want to eat because I'm hungry now. That would be the better way of saying it. Time words always move to the end of my sentence. That's just the order of the English language sentence. Okay? This can change if you want to place emphasis on time. So if you want to say, now I want to eat. Okay? Then your entire sentence basically focuses on time. That's different for this type of task. Don't worry about that. Just remember your time words go at the end. So the answer here, the house was painted by John last week. Okay? This stays at the end. And now we get to another one, which was 1.3. Also something of a, you can say, an oddity when it comes to actives and passives. So in this sentence, I'll have to write it down again. We don't know who stole the document, so we don't know who stole. Okay, so let's follow the basics. So that is going to be my subject. Don't know, it's going to be my verb. And the who stole the documents is going to be my object, okay? So that entire part there will be part of my verb. But in this case, you will notice if you have to change this and say it with your subject included in your sentence, it's going to sound quite strange. So the documents were stolen by someone we do not know. Sounds very horrible, doesn't it? If someone ever asked you a question like, who stole the documents? You would never answer it in the passive way. So what happens here is you omit the last part of that sentence. The answer here is the documents were stolen. That is your answer. So in this sentence, there is not really a focus on this part that we do not know. If you try and change it to active. Well, sorry, passive, okay. So the documents were stolen. Now what I'm trying to show you with this question is whenever there's not an emphasis on an unknown, like a person probably stole these documents, that's why they are missing, but you don't want to say that. All you want to tell someone is that the documents are gone. You are going to use passive because the documents were stolen. If you want to focus on the people who are unknown, and you want to say that that unknown entity has stolen these documents, you will use active. We don't know who stole the documents. Okay, both of these sound natural. It's just this question will show you the different uses of passive and active. Okay, but remember that this was your answer. It would not be very good language to add the subject part at the end of this part here. Okay, grammatically it would still work, but in the natural usage of language it would not work well. Okay, and that is it, grade 9s. That's all common mistakes that I could find. There are quite a few others, but not made as often. And obviously many of you have unique problems, which we will deal with when you have your own work in front of you and I see you again in class. Then we'll go through the entire memo. So thank you, grade 9, for tuning in to grade 9 English lessons, I guess. So there we go. It eludes me. We'll call it lockdown English. Why not? So thank you for tuning in, and I hope you guys stay safe, and hopefully we'll see each other again. Okay, goodbye.